Welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint podcast. I am here with Joe, and Joe has kindly agreed to talk about his experience of learning Chinese and specifically with the Mandarin Blueprint method. But before we get into any of the specifics, Joe, maybe you could introduce yourself and explain what it was that led you wanting to learn Chinese.
Cool. Well, I'll tell you a bit about me first, Phil. So I'm an English Australian. I've been living in Melbourne for the last 10 years or so. And I'm currently studying a double master's in international relations and Chinese political science across Monash and Shanghai Jiao Tong University.
Wow. Nice.
So that's the obvious reason for motivation for learning Mandarin at this stage.
Sure.
So yeah, I was actually meant to go to China around this time, but there's this virus thing going around, so that's stopped. So I originally kind of stumbled upon China by accident. So I was doing my undergraduate degree, planning to do an internship when there was quite a lot of scholarships available to study on exchange at Peking University. So I went at relatively short notice with no background in Chinese or any idea about the cultural barriers. And I really enjoyed my stay despite the barriers. But then when I came back, I was kind of frustrated because I'm like, oh, I've done well in school. I can do uni, but work's fine. But Chinese, I just can't quite get it. Like even when I was in China, I would like memorize the sentence and I would struggle. And then I'd memorize the response and then I'd ask the question and then I'd get not the predetermined response. And then I'd just be frozen. So, when I came back after a while, I tried italki, and I actually went to the Confucius Institute at the University of Melbourne as well. But I found that like what I was doing wasn't sticking, or I'd get it for like a half an hour where I'd done it, and then the next week I'd come back and I'd completely forgot it.
Yeah.
So then I came to you guys through Facebook ads. And I saw them for a little while and I wasn't too sure. Particularly my other like side project is learning about stocks, and the ads that come with that are kind of wild.
Yeah.
So there was like just like Luke speaking Chinese in between all these other wacky ads. I wasn't sure, but then I saw the free trial and I was like, you know what, I've got nothing to lose, and I've been a member of or a client of yours for a fair while now. It's gone really, really well.
Yeah. So you chose international relations, and specifically Chinese political science. Is that right?
Yeah. So
wow. That must be interesting.
I haven't actually got to that part of my studies yet because it's done in China. So I've done the first part, but in the West, it's like China's like there's so much that we don't know, and if I can like specialize or bridge that gap, like from an ideological perspective, as something I'd really, really like to look into further.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's something that I believe in order to. It's kind of a little bit of my personal philosophy, but I believe that if you want to seek truth and not just seek ideology, you have to look at all sides of a particular sort of like. There's these aspects of human nature, like in the sense that we have the capacity to cause suffering, we have the capacity to alleviate suffering, we have the ability for our culture to be a hedge against nature, so it like protects us, it shelters us, it keeps us away from the bad part of nature that's trying to kill us. But on the other hand, culture can become tyrannical, and it can kind of control your life too much if we don't keep it in check. And so there's sort of this good element in nature, bad element of nature, good element of culture, bad element of culture. And I think if you want to be a truth seeker, you have to look at all four corners of that. And a lot of times with the Western propaganda, you'll see only really the bad side of culture from China, in terms of like, they'll just be like, well, look at these things that they're doing. And they're not always wrong in their analysis of it, but they're not seeing how it plays into a larger picture, which is why I think now is more important than ever to learn Chinese, because what you discover when you learn Chinese is that there's this whole element to the society that is, if you were to put a list of values that the average Westerner has next to the list of values that the average Chinese person has, maybe their hierarchy is slightly different, but the actual values themselves are going to have a lot of overlap. There's going to be a lot of like, work really hard for my family and want my kids to have a better future than I had. And, I care about them being in a safe environment and just things like that. You'd be like, yeah, of course. And yet that's never what the news covers because it's not that newsworthy.
Yeah.
It's not like
Yeah.
today a father worked hard for a day so that he could provide for his family. It's like there's nothing newsworthy
Yeah.
about that. So that doesn't make the cut. But it's actually really important that people understand that Chinese people aren't like aliens. They have totally different values than
Yeah.
you. And so you're fighting the good fight by
Yeah.
taking
Absolutely.
on this project.
I think it was because I went in the first time I went was 2018, which
Hmm.
was, and then after I came back, there was sort of that like fear mongering about China.
Hmm.
And I was like, hang on a minute, I've been here and it's not like that. So
Yeah.
that just kind of like, you know, um, harbored my interest
Yeah.
towards what I'm doing now, which I'm really enjoying.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think if the West just framed the debate a little bit better, then they'd probably still get what they want, but it would be in a much more amiable fashion. Like Secretary of State of my country said that the last 40 years of diplomatic relations with China have been a failure, and I was like, that's not the right way to frame this. You can say you want China to change, but like the result of diplomatic relations and economic relations between China and the U.S. pulled 90% of the country out of poverty. So it's like,
Mm,
I mean, it may not have been US people, although they benefited, they got cheap products. But
yeah,
like, gosh, isn't 90% of a country's impoverished population leaving poverty a success? That's it's sort of one of those things where if they started from that frame of like, hey, our trade and diplomatic relations have been a success so far, but you guys aren't so desperate anymore. So maybe we need to get you guys playing by the rules a bit more and letting American companies have more freedom in your country, blah, blah, blah. Totally, that should happen. But it's like, you're not going to get there by immediately antagonizing the entire country. So anyway, we
absolutely.
digress
Yeah,
into political conversation. But yeah,
I could talk about that kind of stuff all day.
I know. Me too. It's very interesting stuff. So, but let's talk a little bit about um, what it would mean for you, if you were to get as fluent and literate in Chinese as your goal. So,
Yeah.
first of all, how literate and fluent are you hoping to get? Because that's not something that's the same for everybody. You could just want to be like, I want to be able to basically have a conversation and get to the bathroom if I need to. Find out where it is or whatever, or
Yeah.
you want to be like giving speeches at the UN. So, like, where are you on that spectrum?
So at this stage, what I was planning to do is to get to like as a stronger foundation as I can, and
Hmm.
then go to China, and then I feel like with like maybe like a HSK3 um, type of level, the language would pick up from there if you are in a Chinese speaking environment.
Hmm.
But like I think that generally like long term, definitely there's like at least proficiency would be important to me.
Hmm.
Um, because like why would it kind of frustrates me. I think someone touched on it in a previous podcast. Being like a white Australian English person, we take speaking one language for granted, and like
Hmm.
now that I see there's merit in speaking multiple languages, it's frustrating me that I'm not proficient in at least one other language. So
Right.
it's a personal thing I want to do for myself, to get to like a good level of Mandarin speaking.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so like if you let's suppose you get there, well, I mean, obviously you're in a major in university that's related to that, but like would is there any thoughts about what you might do with it? Like would you specifically
Oh,
try to get any particular job or are you going to try to get into the dating scene in China or what's the plan? You can speak Mandarin, now what?
Also, my long-term goal is to eventually go into foreign affairs. So
Okay.
in Australia, you do that through an organization called DFAT. So,
Okay.
with a goal of like doing some kind of diplomacy. And there's so many countries where you could do some diplomatic work where Mandarin would be relevant. Like you could go to Singapore. There's Chinese-speaking communities in like India, Indonesia, Malaysia.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Obviously China most notably. Um, yeah, there is a long-term goal to want to go into that, and speaking Mandarin is going to make me more employable
Sure.
at the start. Um, and if I can even help bridge those cultural and ideological misunderstandings, and um, you know, it's going to be something that's really satisfying on a personal level.
Yeah, absolutely. So that I love those goals. All of those goals are the types of goals that um, keep you hungry. They keep you going when you're not particularly in the mood, right? So it's like, as we've harped on in the course loads of times, no 0 days. You got to have even if you just do one flashcard, you can't let 0 days happen because that's how you lose the habit. It's like it does, I mean, I'm not saying like literally 1 0 day will make you lose a habit, but uh, there's no way to keep a habit unless you keep doing it on a daily basis. And so the question is, when you're it's easy to study when you're feeling motivated, but when you're not feeling motivated, when you feel like, what's the point of this? There's so much to learn. How am I ever going to get there? It's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen even this month. Like it's sort of when you have that feeling and you get that negative self-talk, what's going to be there to like keep the fuel going? And it sounds like your goals are great because it's like the loftier the goal, maybe the kind of scarier it is. But on the other hand, you have the ability to sort of oh my gosh, my cat's climbing the walls.
I just saw that behind your shoulder.
Anyway, we got a new little kitty cat named Morty to fit with our other cat Rick. So Rick and Morty. But anyway, so yeah, so that's I think that that type of goal is going to really work for you. So then, okay, now that you've sort of established what you'll do, let's talk a little bit about the course. So you found us through a Facebook ad, and then what was your previous experience? Did you have any previous experience with mnemonic techniques or ways of learning that are kind of maybe more sort of based in the memory palace?
No, not at all. My learning history is pretty much like, the textbook learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I put when I first started learning Chinese, I put a lot of trust in that.
Yeah.
But absolutely very little reward.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just went into it. I was doing uni and working, and I'm working 2 jobs now. So it's quite busy. So I've been progressing through the course at kind of my own pace.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, I found that the memory palace learning technique, or whatever we call it, it's effective. I remember things. You have so many cues
Mm-hmm.
for a word. When I'm doing my Anki cards and I'm looking, I can see, like, for example, I can see that Rolling Stone's mouth, or that scarecrow, or that specific, that thing that's, personal to me.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started, I was thinking I did like the 5th or 6th character, and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to remember this many scenes. But over like a period of time, like, you do. And I'm at character 114 now, and I'm remembering 95% of my Anki cards.
Yeah.
It's really weird because I've never done this kind of learning before, but it works. It does work.
Yeah, that's good to know. So like, I mean, so obviously sometimes we get people who the reason they were attracted to our course because they already were kind of familiar with that world of learning, and so they were like, oh good, these guys are doing that with Chinese. But then we also get people who've never considered that before, and so when we get that, what I'm always curious about is like, what kept you going? Because obviously it must have seemed weird. We're starting off with this wild idea that you're going to imagine yourself in your first office place, and there's Arnold Schwarzenegger just standing there with a ferret and a spoon, and he's like, it's sort of, it's one of those things that's so outrageous that I can imagine that people would think this isn't going to work. So like, what kind of kept you believing that it was going to happen, it was going to actually be effective?
Well, I did the pronunciation mastery course first.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Luke did most of that, and it was just really clear. Like, he was, I would see things like little idiosyncrasies, and he would, and before I'd even got to the writing the question in the comments, he'd acknowledge that in the video.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I'd done the other way, you did the other, more traditional ways of learning Chinese. So I just decided to like put my trust in it for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And after about 15, 20 characters, I had the method. Like, I wasn't really watching too many of the videos. I had the method down pat.
Right.
I was personalizing it. So yeah, it was I just put my trust in it for a couple of days, and after a while, it just stuck, and I couldn't imagine doing it another way now.
Yeah.
Especially when some of the characters look so damn similar. But,
right.
That small prop difference, or that different actor, really does make a difference in how you recall it.
Yeah, what I always find is that, the fact that you have this place that's sort of the starting point where you set the scene, you go, okay, I'm in the kitchen of my first apartment that I lived in after I moved out of my parents' house or something, right? And then
Yeah, yeah,
once I'm in there, then that will trigger oftentimes the rest of the scene in the same way that, if you're away from your hometown for a while, you go back to your hometown, you pass by a place like a bowling alley, let's say, and you look in, or you see the bowling alley, and suddenly your head's flooded with memories of times you spent there, maybe
mm,
even decades ago. Who knows? It's like sort of that that trigger towards the visual memory is so strong that it's the kind of thing that once you realize, oh, I can just manufacture that. I can just make up elements and specifically choose elements that are uh, outrageous, wacky, and memorable in some way, or emotional or something. It's something where you're just making up these ideas, but they're so inherently memorable that it becomes like that. So then, oh, I've forgotten this character, but wait a second, I know that it ends in the final AN, and
yeah,
so I think it's second tone. So I would be in the kitchen of this apartment, and then suddenly you're in there, and then everything else falls into place, and you remember,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
compared to rote learning. I mean, just like you said at the beginning of this call, when you were doing the textbook method, it just wouldn't stay. It's that leaky bucket thing. It's like, you've got the water in there, but there's a hole in the bottom of the bucket, and you just can't keep it filled. And so, that's something that Luke and I realized when we were learning Chinese ourselves, is that this is the only way to do it. That there's just so much information. There's so many words. There's so many characters. So like if you don't use a method like this, that's sort of practicing these super memorable elements, then I don't know. It's just you'd have to be a super masochistic person who's just willing to write things over and over and over again and just feel no sense of boredom, no sense. It's like it's pretty much impossible for most people. Hence why
yeah,
there's such a high failure rate for people learning Mandarin. So,
mm,
um,
mm.
so now you said you got the method within like 10 to 15 characters, which is great. That sounds like you're pretty sharp then. So like after you start to get it, now if you arrive to learn a character, and I'm saying like you already have learned, you've done the set the scene lesson, you've done the casting call, and you arrive at the make a
Mhm.
movie lesson. About
Yeah.
how long on average does it take to go think of the mnemonic devices and then come up with a scene for remembering the character?
Um, I think it depends on the keyword connection. So when it's like kind of an easy keyword,
Mm-hmm.
it can take like, I write it down in like I have a little scene book where I write them all down just in case I ever need to come back to them.
Mm-hmm.
So it probably takes more than like 1 to 2 minutes to write it out.
Mm-hmm.
If the meaning's a bit more abstract, it might take 3 or 4 minutes. I
Sure.
think at this stage, because I like to get my scenes quite clear.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I might look at the comment section below the community just to try and get some ideas as
Mm-hmm.
well. Generally for like 90% of the characters, it takes a couple minutes max. It's pretty
Right.
straightforward. And then, I log them into my Anki and then they're forever in my, learning palace.
Yeah, yeah. It's that's when you think about that, it's like 1 to 2 minutes, sometimes a little longer, but average of 2 minutes. Then you just start doing the math. You just go, okay, well, all right, so 2 minutes. I want to learn 3,000 characters. That's 6,000 minutes. It's not nothing, but
Mm,
6,000 minutes. I mean, people talk about 10,000 hours to become great at something, right? It's like now,
yeah.
obviously, 3,000 characters is really just your foundation, but it's still like that it makes such a difference because Chinese is so logical once you have the basics down. So once you have the main 3,000 characters, which it's no small task, but it's like once you get there, then you go, okay, well that means that I am, you know, you're in a position where you can learn organically because so much of the language makes sense. It's like you read a word and you've never seen it before, but you immediately know what it means because it's just like
Yeah.
so most characters are 2 character words. And then you say, okay, here's an example of a 2 character word. You'll learn 家庭, which just means like household or family. Sort of the more like general aspect. 家人 is like your specific family members, but then 家庭 is like household, like a 核心家庭 is a nuclear family, right? So it's like that's what you mean by 家庭. Now, if you see a word like Da jiating. It's like, oh, I wonder what that means. Oh, it probably means big family. You have a big
Yeah.
family. It's like, or how about this? Jiating guan. Guan means to observe, but it also means value, right? So it's like, okay, so jiating guan is family values. You don't need to know the dictionary definition if you know the characters. And so you start reading and you just sort of, and then you also have the context of the rest of the paragraph and the article or whatever you're reading or the story. And so it becomes so simple. So like if you know in 6,000 minutes, you can be knowing all of the main elements of the stuff you're reading, then the reading just is pleasurable and it's like this constant state of light bulbs. It's just like light bulb, light bulb, light bulb. And so, that's you're in very good shape moving forward with that type of starting point. So that's great. Um,
Thank you.
so you've mentioned pronunciation mastery. You mentioned sort of the how it's been going with the Hansa movie method. Oh, and just by the way, I just wanted to mention, it's good that you've been writing down your scenes, but I will tell
Yeah.
you, you can drop that habit at some point if you want, because at this point you should probably have enough confidence to believe that you'll remember it anyway. Because theoretically, like, think of it like this. So things that you actually remember from your life, just any past memory that you have, you
Mm.
remember it without ever having to write it down. I mean, maybe you're the type of guy who keeps a journal and writes down what happened each day, but like it's still you just remember them because they're inherently memorable. So it's like if you get good at these, then theoretically you can even dispense with the writing them down. It's not a bad thing to do in the first 114 characters because it really solidifies the method, but I'm going to try it. I don't know, maybe for 10 characters, like take note of them and don't write anything down and just see how well you remember them compared to the ones that you did write down. You might find that it's not too much of a difference. So
Yeah,
just a
no, definitely. I
small
think,
suggestion. Yeah.
yeah, no, this like learning process is like me consciously unlearning my previous like learning, unconsciously unwinding my previous learning habits.
Right.
So that's something that I do as well. Can definitely give it a go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You-
Cool. Cool.
you
So
said-
yeah. So what part of the course do you feel has made the biggest impact so far?
Yeah, actually, I saw this question and I actually wrote down answers, so I made sure I got
Great.
said the right thing.
Sure.
So the first one I got is Anki because it holds you accountable. Every day I've got to do my Anki, even if I've got a big day where I can't sit down and do any videos. I've got my Anki to do.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps me accountable. It gives me clear revision work to do. I think the course needs that kind of tool.
Mm-hmm.
For it to remember that it's fantastic and it's really I'm remembering stuff that I haven't thought about for days and I wouldn't have thought that. There's been times where I've forgot to unsuspend some cards,
Oh,
for
right.
example, and when I go back to them, I can't remember them, but the cards I learned on the same day that I did unsuspend, I'm remembering. So I'm seeing like proof that it's important to do Yankee every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other one, yeah, the video or the lessons in general, they're clear, they're structured, they're well thought out. They give you, particularly at the start where you kind of like hold our hands through the process,
Mm-hmm.
they really help you understand what's going on. There's little, I said there's like little nuances that come out in like learning the language because it's not entirely logical, but like, all the time you and Luke, sorry, are acknowledging those, if I think of an example early in the method, it would be like the word for year, like Nian.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, there's the stick prop in that, but you guys are like, oh, it's the stick, but it's the shorter stick in this character,
Right.
You guys are actually, when I first looked at it, I was like, where's this bloody stick?
Yeah.
But you guys acknowledge that really quickly.
Yeah.
And the method as a whole, I think that it helps personalize your language learning. Like I'm including my own personal things in that, like even like I'm English Australian, so I'm a cricket fan. I've got
Sure.
cricketers as some as my actors, whereas as an American, I'm assuming you wouldn't know much about cricket. So,
No.
but
Yeah. I mean, I'm aware it exists, but yeah, no, that's about it.
you might have like NFL players in your it's
Sure.
your own
Yeah.
personal method. You're making it unique to you, and because of that, it sticks. It's your hands and movie method.
Exactly. That's
So I
what
think
it is.
those three things are
It's
really awesome.
fantastic, that stuff, because that means like whenever I read somebody's comment and they're like, hey, how about you choose this anime character or something? And I know loads of people love anime. I just never got into it. And so like I'm like, oh, good, they're sharing that stuff, and that's definitely going to connect with people. And I never would have suggested that because it's just not in my, personal experience. So like when I see that, I'm so pleased because of course you're right. It's yours. It's like there's obviously we're giving you the structure throughout the course, but everything that you fill in is about your life, and it's kind of like this little autobiography you end up doing as you're going
Yeah.
through. And then like I've had times where I was learning a character, and it made me think about somebody who I haven't talked to in a long time, and then I go like,
Mm.
oh, I want to give that person a call, and then, next thing you know, I'm talking to an old friend or something because I was
Yeah.
imagining them in a character scene that I was doing. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's very nice in
It's
that way.
hilarious. It's hilarious. Like I did a scene for Doi where and I was thinking like how many people are gonna have this thought where you have Disco Stu from The Simpsons
Yeah.
exchanging money with the captain of the England cricket team in a KFC.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah. I love it.
It's a weird method, but it works.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. So, another thing I'm curious about that has sort of developed is what's your experience been so far? And you alluded to this before, but what's your experience been so far of the sort of community aspect of the course, the comments below the videos, the community forum, just sort of the way that you can interact with the podcast or things like that. What's your experience of that, and how do you utilize it?
So I definitely watch the specific parts of the podcast that come up, and I read the comments a lot when I'm struggling for inspiration for my scenes.
Hmm.
And it's really good. Like everyone's really positive, really encouraging. The fact that I can interact with the founders of this, the architects of this course is really cool.
Mm.
So I definitely I use it. The one thing I probably want to do more is have more conversations with other members of the other clients,
Hmm.
um, because like I can't just start discussing with like my Chinese friend. Oh, I can't remember my hands and method scene where I've got this person doing that, and they're going to look at me and be like, hmm. So I
Yeah,
definitely
sure.
want to speak to more members in the community. But it's great, like the fact that we can all interact with each other is, it's only going to be beneficial.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think I definitely want to look into more like speaking on that like level with other clients.
Yeah, yeah, I think the community forum would definitely be good for that.
Yeah,
Yeah, so but that's it's just been such a surprise to us, and like a privilege that so many people have engaged with the content, because Luke and I obviously we had this wild idea of putting this all together into a course online, but like that doesn't mean anybody's going to care or pay attention to it or interact
yeah,
with it at all. So it's like every time people are always like, how do you people ask us a lot, like, how do you respond to all these things, throughout the day and stuff. And a couple of people have been like, how are you going to handle this when you have more people? And I'm like, gosh, of all the good problems, like, I don't, it's like, we'll figure it out. Like, we'll figure out how to deal with it. But I can't imagine just ignoring somebody who's like, I am engaging with the content that you made, and then just me being like, you're not worth my time. It's like, come on. Like, that
yeah,
I'll gladly answer anybody who wants to, who's engaging with it, because it's just, I'm so thrilled that they're getting value. So it's like, that's like a major fuel for us. I know that. So that's
yeah.
great to hear. So, all right, well then, how about ways in which we might be able to improve the course? So have you been going through and thinking, like, I appreciate that. I appreciate these things, but you know what? They're really missing some element, or, I don't like this, or something of that nature. Is there anything that we could improve?
You know, I really thought hard about this. Like I genuinely thought hard about this. And I at this stage I couldn't think of anything realistic that you guys could do.
Mhm.
I think the course is really well put together. It's it's only going to get better. And like if I'm looking at it at this stage now, it might be, if I get to like 500, 600 characters and I have like a good foundation of Chinese, and then I look back at something, maybe I'd pick it up.
Right.
But
Yeah.
there's absolutely nothing major that I could see. That you guys give us the foundation, and you do have to be willing to put in the work. You do have to be willing to look at like secondary sources to supplement your learning. But there's like Cheven's Bow or something,
Hmm.
or having a one-on-one tutor to
Yeah.
speak to occasionally. But um, if someone's willing to put in the work, then you've given them all the tools available to have a strong foundation, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think there's too much at all that I can think of that you guys could improve.
Fair enough. Fair enough. That's good. That's great feedback to get. We will be making some improvements to, like, we've got we have so many things we want to do, obviously, but we're still, we're working away, and we're gonna, maybe gosh, it's so hard to decide sometimes, but I think one of the things we want to try to do relatively soon is see about potentially developing the nascent form of our app. We've made a full, like, set of wireframes for our app that would be, it would it would make the course a little bit more integrated. So it'd be the kind of thing where you finish a lesson, and instead of having to go to a different application and unsuspend a flashcard, it would just automatically unsuspend the flashcard, and you would type in your actor, and then every time that actor comes up again, instead of saying, your ZH actor, it would say George Clooney or whatever, right? And so we hope to get that going at some point. But the first stage of it would just be to replace Anki with an SRS. Maybe
Yeah,
not the
yeah,
full integrated app, but just an app that's like the Mandarin Blueprint app for the flashcards. So you could at least just go, okay, unsuspend these cards, enter those cards in, and then you don't have to deal with all the user unfriendliness of Anki.
yeah,
People
yeah.
in a younger age group don't tend to have too much of a problem with Anki, although they can't believe how poorly designed it is. But, like, sometimes we just get questions every day, just being like, "What's this? I don't understand this." And it's like, "Oh yeah, you didn't click on the deck name." And so, like, they're
Yeah.
like, "I can't get to my cards," and I'm like, "Yeah, you just gotta click on the name of the deck."
No,
But it's sort of, we just want to get rid of
I
Anki if possible. I mean, we love it. It's like, it's the greatest thing and the worst thing at the same time. So that's
it's
Anki.
not too bad, but I can definitely see where like that's something you'd want to improve upon, particularly like if you have older clients.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so then the final question I would ask you just is, if I were coming to you and as a potential Chinese learner, and I said, Joe, should I learn Mandarin through Mandarin Blueprints? What would you say?
um, I'd recommend it absolutely. I think that it breaks down Mandarin into a method that's under like it's easy to interpret. And after not long of getting into the method, you understand the logic behind it. And although it's still weird and wacky along the way, like you know you're memorizing things. You guys are interacting with your clients. That's not something that I necessarily expected going into the course. I think that's a bonus. And I also think that you having Chinese taught from someone with a native English speaking background for me really helped because when you're looking at it, you're saying, oh, this sound, but it's not really in English, but it's kind of like this one, and then
Mm-hmm.
you kind of remember, you know what I mean, like with the like the Jews and the shoes,
Mm-hmm.
and what you guys are you're breaking it down into a method that for a native or proficient English speaker, you're making it. I don't know how to put it, but it's just I'm understanding more because you guys are acknowledging it from my perspective rather than
Right.
just being like told like, no, this isn't right. You need to do it like this. This sounds that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it makes sense coming from you guys, I think.
Yeah, yeah. There's this Chinese idiom that is the idiom is 设身处地, and what that means is, like, literally, like, set your body in another location. So it basically means, like, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, set your body in their body, kind of like. And so imagine them from that position, and that that sort of gives you a sense of how we can the advantage we have over a native Chinese teacher. And we, think native Chinese teachers have their place mostly in the context of conversation partners and tutors. But if you have a foundation for how to learn, it's like, but a lot of times native Chinese teachers, bless them, they're trying their best, but they don't get how it appears from an adult perspective as a foreigner. It's like, sort of, you don't they just can't. I don't see how they could empathize with it. It's I tried teaching English when
Yeah.
I was first in China, and I found it very frustrating. Like I found the whole thing just like, I don't know why. Like they would be like, why is it like this? I'm like, I don't know. I just learned this naturally growing up. And so when they would
Yeah,
ask me questions, I felt like I'm a terrible English teacher, you know? And so it
yeah,
was just hard to empathize. And so we can obviously having gone through it. So that's, good feedback to hear. And I'm glad that, you feel that way, because that makes me confident that people in the future will also, um, get that type of feeling from
yeah,
Mandarin Blueprint.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Joe, for taking the time today. And we'll leave it there. And if anybody's interested in checking out Mandarin Blueprint, just go to mandarinblueprint.com, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Phil. See you later.
谢谢你观看我们的这个视频. If you found this video valuable and you'd like us to help you reach fluency and literacy in Mandarin Chinese as fast as possible without all the headache of traditional learning methods, just head to mandarinblueprint.com to learn more. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell below to be notified every time we release a new video. And of course, 保重